Welcome to the Social Learning Amplified podcast, the podcast that brings us candid conversations with educators who are finding new ways to engage and motivate their students inside and outside the classroom. Each episode of Social Learning Amplified will give you real-life examples and practical strategies you can put into practice in your own courses. Let's meet today's guest. Welcome to Social Learning Amplified. I'm your host, Eric Mazur, and our guests on the episode today are Brad Butler and Adam Baldry, instructional technologists from Pima Community College in Tucson, Arizona. Adam uses his 10 plus years of in-person and online teaching experience to inform his approach to edtech management and innovation. Brad is an advocate for positive change that education can have on people and people's lives, and loves how technology can improve educational opportunities for everyone. Adam's background is in Asian studies, and Brad holds a degree in secondary education and social sciences. It's a pleasure to have you both here today.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks. It's really great to be here today.
I first heard about your enthusiasm for edtech in the podcast you made for the Perusall Exchange 2022, where you discuss what you call magical solutions for dispelling student engagement. You know, magical solutions, don't we all love those? I was, of course, particularly pleased that you singled out Perusall as one of those magical solutions. What makes Perusall magical?
Thanks for commenting us on our podcast. Adam and I had a great time making it. Part of our philosophy with kind of presenting information is we always want to make it entertaining for us to produce, and so hopefully entertaining for others to take in. And so as we were thinking about kind of student engagement on the community college level and kind of what tools that were being implemented at our college, Perusall just kind of jumped straight to the top of our heads when thinking about engagement, and specifically that we are piloting Perusall in several of our courses here at the college. And so with that pilot, we also include a student and instructor survey. And a lot of the feedback we got, especially from students, is just how Perusall helped them feel connected to their classmates, their peers. And then within that, just how much more engaged they were with their peers, and then also the content that they were reading inside Perusall. So just as we thought of that idea of engagement, Perusall and kind of those survey responses that we saw really jumped to the forefront of our mind and made it easy for us to focus our podcast on that.
And why the magical, or how is it magical? I would say, talking with instructors, they often were like, it's almost like magic. The amount of time I'm saving by having Perusall and the kind of data that I get from looking at the students. And so that was one of our jumps. And we were both big fans of, fantasy. So we thought, why not run with that theme and highlight this tool?
That's wonderful to hear. Now, before instructors actually use Perusall, there has to be a reason for them to use it. So why are instructors at Pima Community Colleges using Perusall? What problem does it solve in their classrooms?
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, because part of Adam and I's philosophy around technology tools is we only want to use and adopt technology tools that meet pedagogical needs of our instructors and learners. And so again, Perusall really was what some faculty turned to even before Adam and I showed up at Pima Community College. There was a couple of instructors who identified Perusall as a means of answering some of those needs. And really what they were looking at and looking for were kind of the basics of what Perusall offers is, how do I know my students are actually reading the content that I'm assigning them? And so Perusall allows for them to see that. And then also part of that is just kind of how deep or how much interaction are they having, or engagement are they having with the text that they're reading? And then how can we utilize this tool, Perusall, to kind of start conversations around the text? So instead of students reading on their own and then maybe coming to class or maybe a Zoom environment in terms of discussion and just kind of starting that conversation within that meeting, the conversations around the text can actually happen within Perusall itself. And so kind of that precursor to the beginning of the conversation. And then also the big one was also being able to analyze, or not analyze, being able to annotate text and across different platforms, which again is one of the things that Perusall offers within its platform.
Yeah, and I would just add on there the idea that students are able to build a community. There was a need seen by our instructors that we want our students, especially in the online environment, to feel connected to each other. Pima Community College is a Hispanic serving institution. We work with a lot of low socioeconomic students that are coming from underserved communities. And they need that community to stay connected and to persevere and keep going. And that really seems to stand out to our instructors as something that Perusall is offering. The students are not just engaging with the text, but they're engaging with each other. And that's something that we mentioned in our podcast, right? Is this idea that we were so surprised at how much and how often students were mentioning that they were building community and engaging with other students, and they saw that as a top benefit from using Perusall.
I see. So there are sort of several questions that come in my mind as I listen to you here. The first one is, I hear that your instructors were already engaged in sort of a flipped approach to teaching. So that was already that pedagogy was already embedded on campus. Is that correct?
Yes. That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yes.
That's wonderful to hear, because I mean, even at my own institution, that still meets so much resistance. I mean, it's the instructor who has to deliver the information and the student who has to learn the content, not realizing that the understanding is built through discussion and that the information transfer is just that, an information transfer. The other thing is what type of courses was it being implemented in both the flipped learning, and were these texts in the humanities or across all disciplines?
Well, I was just going to say, it kind of goes back to what your previous question, or kind of the point that you just made, is actually Perusall was adopted by an instructor within our humanities social studies history, to be exact, who's pretty on top of it when it comes to kind of new teaching techniques and new teaching technologies. And so I think that's a big part of it too. And so her being willing to kind of take this on board before Adam and I were a part of Pima, and really kind of being a big advocate for it. The problem being is that, she's an instructor, as you fully realize, the time just kind of goes by so quickly. You don't really have time to really take on a tool and advocate it and like support it and really kind of help increase its usage on campus. And so hopefully that's where Adam and I come in and kind of doing that. But having her being kind of that, what we refer to kind of as the tech champion of a particular tool, really kind of helps move that movement in terms of what the tool offers, but then also, like you said, kind of changing how teaching is happening at the community college level. And so that mindset of, this is a different way of teaching, and there's also tools out there that help support these different ways of teaching.
So has it spread from the social sciences to the natural sciences to the humanities?
So we have it's more in humanities. So we have some like sociology courses that are running it, and then a couple of writing programs have started using it. We also have some interest from some reading programs on campus. We are really trying to reach out to kind of STEM courses to help increase the awareness of Perusall there, and hopefully seeing some instructors adopt it within that particular programs and departments too. So really, as we continue the pilot and as we get this data from our pilot and the success stories within the classrooms from the instructors and the students, really being able to use that to advocate it across different programs.
And that's also part of our overall goal. Right now, we have Perusall in what we call a pilot. So we're doing a pilot of Perusall, and we have been focused so far on the social sciences. So we wanted to kind of gather initial data, understand, right? We've been referring to our student surveys a little bit as we've been talking today. That's where that comes out of, is we collect pilot data and try to understand the instructor and student experience. Now we have really, really strong data that shows that Perusall is effective. Our students want it in more of their courses at Pima Community College. It's helping them. They've expressed several benefits. And so we have the data to show our leadership. We should be using this across the college. And so we're aiming towards growing that into more areas. And we've begun kind of making contact with some of our deans and department heads, division heads, and having those conversations.
So does that mean that you're planning to institutionalize Perusal? And, I presume that that could meet with resistance from some instructors who really don't want anything about Perusal. What are your plans there?
Yeah, that's our ultimate goal, is kind of identifying, what Perusal offers and how it fits within our institution, and moving towards the kind of institutional wide usage. Adam and I are really strong advocates of not pushing technology on people. So this isn't something that's going to be like, this is something you have to use. It's more of, this will help me resolve some of the challenges that I'm having in my courses, or maybe it's an answer to some of the things that I want to do in my course as well. So really nothing that we're going to push across, but really hopeful that it can be something that is utilized across the entirety of the college, and being able to support that. With that though, just kind of continually growing its numbers, given the support that we're providing, giving the resources that we will eventually provide. Um, Right now it's in that pilot phase. Next, we would move it into more of a kind of a slow rollout phase, where we'd increase its usage and start developing our user support for it, and kind of models of how to use it, implementation within our courses. And then hopefully, if it moves beyond the soft launch, the kind of a hard launch where, hey, this is available college wide, and where are the resources for you to come and figure out how to use it, and kind of get best practices for it as well. Currently, because we are in the pilot mode, it's mostly been utilized with inside of kind of live courses or hybrid courses. Adam and I work with the department that's a part of Pima Online. And so the next phase for us is putting it into online courses. And we use a master course model. And so you have an instructor designer who works with a subject matter expert, and they create a course, and that course can be utilized by multiple different faculty across multiple different semesters. And so being able to implement Perusal into these master courses within these online courses is going to be kind of our next big step. And we do have one example in a journalism class that did that last year. And so being able to use that as kind of a springboard to implementing it into more courses. And luckily, perfectly the way that Perusal is set up, it allows for that to happen within our master course model, which tends to kind of run into some difficulties with other technology tools. But with Perusal's ability to copy the library forward into another course, we just have to provide them with that course code, and then they can bring over all those documents, bring over all those assignments, and they're good to go. So thankfully, Perusal is a good technology in order to support our master course model.
I think that what you said there makes a lot of sense, right? You can't shove down technology down people's throats. I mean, it's the pedagogy that has to be there first, and as we talked about earlier, it was the instructors who had already implemented flipped learning who were the most likely candidates to adopt Perusal. So, how many instructors are participating in this pilot?
Currently, I think it's around 10 to 15 for Perusal. And so hopefully increasing that, as we've been mentioning. And as you said, it's easy to find the instructors that are already kind of thinking outside the box, or kind of the different teaching methods. But being able to use their examples, and again, our data, to then present it to maybe the more traditional teachers and more traditional instructors, and getting them to kind of have that light bulb moment of like, hey, maybe since this is working for other people, I could give it a try, and might work for, my specific course too. So really part of the next steps is going to be kind of getting those examples, getting the supporting data to be able to present to them. Because even going back to kind of the last question, it is still rough when there is campus-wide adoption of the technology, there's always going to be those people that are kind of questioning why. But really, that's the strength of our pilot program, and that Adam mentioned, is collecting that data and saying, hey, this wasn't just a flippant kind of purchasing or adoption of a technology. Like, we have the documentation, we have the data from within our institution, from our students, from our instructors, that say this is a good tool and valuable to our classrooms and to our learners.
Mm. So, turning to Adam, how is Perusal being implemented? The reason why I'm asking is this: I heard from an instructor at a community college. I forgot her name now, but she was essentially implementing Perusal in a way that I had never imagined in an online course. Right? The way I had originally conceived of the idea was that, I was engaged in flipped learning. I wanted to have the active learning in the classroom and the information transfer out of the classroom. So Perusal, in a certain sense, became the asynchronous online component of my class so that I could do more meaningful things in the classroom. This instructor, however, made Perusal the classroom for her online course. This is where the students interacted with each other online. So for the online course, Perusal was not the sort of pre-class engagement, but it became the class. I would love to hear from you how instructors at Pima Community College are implementing Perusal.
Absolutely, yeah, it's a great question. It immediately brought to mind this instructor we talked about, Kim Lisa Salazar. She shared with us in our podcast that we did for Perusal Exchange this really wonderful experience that she has in her classroom. And it's only grown since. So we just had a conversation with her recently how that has improved. So what she shared in our podcast is that the idea that the students are really building community, they're engaging with each other like they would in a regular class, but in some ways at a deeper level than often many students are willing to do because of maybe social anxiety or other things of being there in person. But they're very engaged online. The amount of comments, she compared it to the number of comments she gets in a discussion, just a regular discussion board in our LMS versus in Perusal. It's just amplified and absolutely just wonderful for her to see. And then the accountability that they hold each other to. So they had, she addresses some political topics that can be kind of divisive. And one student made a comment that other students felt went too far and said, hey, I think you've gone too far on this. And she addressed it with the student, and the student realized that they had gone too far, apologized to the rest of the class, and they all grew together. So it's something that is really a legitimate replacement for that simulation of being in class, being in person, learning those interpersonal skills in that online space, all while discussing these interesting topics that are relevant to their courses. So it's really quite nice to see. And since then, she's actually begun pairing Perusal with another technology and has found that that has also amplified. So students are now starting conversations in Perusal, and then she has another discussion tool she uses with it, and now they're diving in even deeper. And so she's finding that when paired up with other tools, doing this kind of app smashing that is sometimes talked about, she's finding a lot of success. So it's really exciting to see, that their students are engaging in some ways a lot more meaningfully and a lot more prevalent. They're doing more engagement than they typically would even in an in-person class.
So going back to something you said earlier, Brad, you talked about, using this pilot to collect data. And I think that's great because data and research is what lays the foundation for an informed implementation and will help. I presume you want to make these instructors who are participating in the pilot sort of evangelists on your campus. And if they can show with data the success of implementing Perusal, that's wonderful. What kind of data, and what have you learned from those data?
Yeah, so we kind of use a mixture of quantitative and qualitative. We send out a survey that students reply to, and then also the instructors have an example or a survey that they answer. So the first part of it is just kind of the usability of of Perusall. So just kind of giving us any ideas because we are the team that supports Perusall. We're also looking at how can we make it easier for learners and instructors to get in and use Perusall. But then we also ask them about, does it help you in your analyzation of documents? Does it help you with your analytical reading? And then getting into, some qualitative of, how has Perusall helped you out? That's where we get a lot of the unsolicited. When we first started out, we weren't really looking specifically at how Perusall will build community, but over and over and over again in the student responses, they kept talking about community. And so being able to kind of use the combination of both sides of those to kind of see where Perusall is impacting students. So it's a kind of a mixture of, how are you being able to use a tool? Is the tool, effective from your mindset, kind of based on when you started using it towards the end of the semester? And then we love hearing from the students because that's where we get those specific examples of either things that we could help with to make, Perusall a little bit easier to learn or utilize, or just the overall impact that Perusall is having. And then even one of the questions centers around, would you rather use Perusall instead of like the discussion board with inside of D2L? So just kind of more specific pointed questions just to see. And then also, as Adam mentioned earlier, how would you prefer, or would you like for Perusall to be utilized in other courses across the college that you have taken or you will be taking? So kind of using a combination of the two. And we utilize the same survey across the different semesters just to make sure that we get the kind of same feedback and kind of the same diagnostics of it.
Right. So in closing, and I think you've already alluded to some of this, but it'd be nice to hear sort of this as a closing comment for our podcast today. What are the next steps for Perusall at Pima Community College? Or, are there things you would like Perusall to do which it doesn't do yet? Maybe I can have both of you comment on that briefly, starting with Adam.
Yeah, so our plan is we're looking at what we called earlier soft launch. So we'll begin making it more widely available and actively be working with unit leadership around our college to identify instructors that would be interested in piloting courses that they feel like they want to build more community, or they're having certain pedagogical pain points that we feel Perusall may be a solution for. And then from there, what we'll do is we like to provide a zero memorization knowledge base that's specific to our institution. So Brad and I would work over the summer to flush something like that out so that our instructors have very tailored, specific documentation to help them with anything they would need with Perusall, with an aim to do kind of a hard launch, hopefully in the fall, following good data from the soft launch. So we're ready to move forward from this pilot that we've been saying and start to scale up. So we're going to be working towards that.
Wonderful. Brad.
Yeah, so just as Adam mentioned, just looking forward to more courses utilizing it. And as you said earlier, just kind of seeing how different instructors embrace Perusall and the different ways that they use it. That's something that Adam and I love to see and learn about, is just kind of the innovative uses of our technology tools. A lot of times tools are meant to do one thing or a couple of things, and then you have those outside the box thinkers who embrace it and take it and kind of use it in an interesting way, and just how can we build on that, or how could other instructors build on that. So far, we've loved the new features that Perusall has come out with. I remember at my last institution, we also used Perusall, and an instructor was struggling with, like, how do I present podcasts in a manner that I know students are engaging with them, and how can they interact with them and interact with others. And that's when I noticed that Perusall had added the podcast feature, the documentation within podcasts. So I think just having all those different types of documents with inside Perusall can also benefit instructors, because it doesn't have to be reading after reading of text over and over. They could also provide them with video and podcast, and it's in a familiar tool. It's not a new learning curve that students have to go in and learn a new tool. It's something that they're familiar with if you have implemented Perusall from the beginning in your course.
Well, that's absolutely wonderful. And I look forward to hearing about your scale up efforts over the summer. So please do stay in touch. Thank you for listening. And thank you to our guests, Adam Baldry and Brad Butler. Thank you so much for joining today. You can find our podcast and more on perusall.com/social learning amplified, one word. Please subscribe to make sure you don't miss any episodes, and I hope you will join us again on our next episode. Social Learning Amplified is sponsored by Perusall, the social learning platform that motivates students by increasing engagement, driving collaboration, and building community through your favorite course content. To learn more, join us at one of our introductory webinars. Visit perusall.com to learn more and register.